You ever feel like someone is whispering in your ear, even when you know you're alone? Like a breath against your skin, a voice just below the surface of your thoughts, waiting for the right moment to push through? That's how it starts. Not with a scream, not with a gunshot, but with something quiet, something that slips into the spaces between your thoughts and settles there like a seed. That's what happened to them. And maybe, if I'm not careful, it'll happen to me too. Detective Aaron Collins. I've seen more bodies than I care to count, stood in more blood than I'll ever admit. But this case, this one is different, not just because of the bodies, not just because of how they died, but because of how they got there. The footage came in last night, the grainy security feed from a nightclub that should have been long dead, its doors chained shut, its floors covered in dust. But the tape told a different story. It showed a stage, a single spotlight, and a man standing in its center. He was tall, with a sharp suit and sharper features, his slicked back hair making him look like he'd stepped out of another time. And his voice, though the recording was silent, I swear I could hear it. The camera was positioned high in the back corner, the kind of angle meant for security, not for a performance. But the people in the chairs, God, the people didn't seem to notice. Their backs were too straight, their hands rested too still in their laps. A dozen of them, maybe more, their faces slack, their eyes blank. The man on stage moved his hands in slow, deliberate gestures, and the audience followed, tilting their heads in unison, their fingers twitching in rhythm. Then one by one they stood. They moved to the stage like sleepwalkers. No hesitation, no resistance, just obedience. I had to pause the footage. I needed a breath. I've seen death. I've seen horror. But this was different. I pressed play again, already knowing what I'd see. The first woman stepped forward. She was young, maybe early 20s. Her hands trembled, but not from fear, from something else. Her lips moved, barely a whisper. Then with a flick of the hypnotist's wrist, she reached into her pocket, pulled out something small and sharp, and pressed it to her throat. There was no struggle, no panic. She smiled, and then she fell. One by one, they followed. A man unfastened his tie, looped it around his throat, and pulled until his body went limp. Another woman climbed onto the stage lights and let herself drop. Each of them as if it had been planned, as if they had rehearsed, as if they wanted it. And the hypnotist, Charlie Graves, he only watched. I rewound the footage, scouring for anything I might have missed, something, anything that would make sense of it. And that's when I saw her, the outlier, the mistake in the pattern. Vanessa Cruz. She sat near the back, her body stiff, her hands gripping the armrests. Her lips moved faster than the others, as if she was fighting it, repeating something to herself over and over. I turned up the audio, but the feed was too grainy to pick up her words. She shook her head, her nails digging into her palms, leaving deep crescent moons in her skin. And then she stood, but not like the others, not with empty eyes and a puppet's grace. She swayed, clenched her fists. She turned toward the people still seated, grabbed a man by the shoulders, shook him. Her mouth moved frantically. She was trying to stop them, but Charlie saw her, and when he did, he smiled. That's where the tape ended. No ending, no closure, just static. The club was abandoned, the doors chained, no sign of the bodies. But we knew they were real. Their families had filed missing persons reports. Their names matched, their faces matched. But there was no crime scene, no blood, no bodies, just a tape, a warning, or maybe an invitation. I ran a hand down my face, my mind buzzing. There was only one way to find out the truth. I had to go there, to the place where it happened, to the last stage Charlie Graves ever performed on. And I had to hope the show wasn't still running. I parked my car a block away from the club, letting the engine hum for a moment before I killed the lights. The street was quieter than I expected, even for this part of town. A few flickering neon signs buzzed weakly in the distance, their reflections stretching long and broken across the wet pavement. The air smelled like old cigarettes and spilled beer, a ghost of the nights this place used to live through. The club itself loomed ahead, swallowed in darkness. The sign that once spelled its name had long since lost most of its letters. leaving behind only twisted metal and rust. The front doors were chained, just as they had been in the footage, a heavy lock hanging like a dead weight in the center. I walked up slowly, letting my fingers trail along the cold metal. It should have felt abandoned. It should have felt empty, but it didn't. There was something here, something watching. I tried the side alley first. The brick walls felt too close, pressing in on either side as I moved through the narrow space. Garbage bags sat in lumpy piles, their insides rotting and sour, a sharp contrast to the cold night air. A single door stood at the end of the alley, its paint peeling in long, curling strips. It was locked, but the frame was weak, the wood swollen and brittle from years of neglect. One good shove, and the door gave way with a groan that echoed in the stillness. The air inside was heavy, stagnant. It had the kind of stillness that pressed against your skin, made you feel like you were stepping into something that didn't want to be disturbed. The club stretched out before me, a cavern of forgotten memories, its stage swallowed in darkness. Rows of empty chairs stood in perfect formation, their fabrics stiff with dust. The faintest scent of something sweet and acrid lingered in the air. Incense, maybe, or the remnants of perfume long since faded. I stepped forward, my boots scuffing against the floor, and that's when I saw them. The footprints. They weren't old. The dust had been disturbed in careful, deliberate patterns. Someone had been here recently. I followed them, my breath slow, steady, controlled. They led toward the stage, where the lone spotlight still hung above, its bulb cracked but intact. I reached out, brushing my fingers along the microphone stand that still stood in the center. The metal was cold, and then beneath my touch, it shifted. The air around me seemed to tighten, like a held breath waiting to be released. A whisper so faint I almost convinced myself I had imagined it, curled against my ear. "Aaron!" I turned sharply, my heart hammering against my ribs, my fingers already reaching for the gun at my side. But there was nothing, no movement, no breath of warmth in the air. Just the club, silent and watching. And then I saw it. At the edge of the stage, barely visible in the dim light, a chair had been pulled out from the others. It faced away from the rest, turned instead toward the wall, as if someone had been sitting there, watching the stage instead of the show. A small pile of ash rested on the seat, the last remains of whatever had been left there. I reached down, rubbing the powdery substance between my fingers. It had a strange texture, finer than cigarette ash with a faint metallic scent. Then the whisper again. Not from behind me this time, from the speakers. I turned slowly, my stomach knotting, my pulse loud in my ears. The sound system should have been dead. It hadn't been used in years, but the speakers crackled to life, the static breaking through the silence like a breath catching in a throat. And then, faint, distant, distorted, came the sound of applause. A single clap at first, then another, then dozens layered over one another, growing louder, closer, until the walls seemed to vibrate with the force of it. I stepped back, my eyes scanning the room, but there was no one, no audience, no performer, just me. And yet the sound continued. I gritted my teeth, forcing myself to move. Whatever this was, it wasn't real. It was a trick, an illusion, a remnant of something left behind. That's what I told myself over and over as I moved toward the door at the back of the club. The one that led backstage. The applause cut off the moment my hand touched the knob. And in the silence that followed, I heard something else. Breathing. Not my own. It was slow, measured, coming from just beyond the door. Someone, or something, was waiting on the other side. I swallowed hard, steadying myself. Then with one deep breath, I turned the knob and stepped inside. The door creaked as it swung open, the hinges groaning like something old and half forgotten, the kind of sound that made the hairs on the back of my neck rise before I even set foot inside. The air beyond was different, heavier somehow, thick with the scent of something stale and cloying, like old perfume left too long in a closed room. The darkness swallowed everything beyond a few feet, the weak spill of light from the club barely cutting into the space. I forced myself to step forward, my boots making the kind of soft scuffing noise that told me the floor was covered in dust, undisturbed except for one thing. Tracks, footprints deep and uneven, leading deeper into the backstage corridors. I followed them. Something about the space felt wrong, like the air had a weight to it that pressed against my skin, making each step feel just a little harder than the last. The walls were lined with old posters, their edges curling and brittle, peeling away from the surfaces as if trying to escape. Faces stared out from them, frozen in time, their eyes wide and hollow beneath bold, fading text. Most of them were for old acts, comedians, singers, performers whose names had been forgotten by the city that once cheered for them. But one poster stood out from the rest, fresher somehow, untouched by the decay around it. Charlie Graves. His face was larger than life, his expression frozen in a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. The words beneath his name were simple, elegant, the kind of thing designed to linger in the back of a person's mind long after they'd looked away. You'll never forget the show. I reached out, my fingers ghosting over the surface of the poster, and beneath the paper the wall felt strange, too smooth, too cool, like something had been sealed behind it. I pressed harder, running my palm along the surface, and for the briefest moment I swore I felt movement beneath my touch. Something shifting, stretching, like fabric pulled tight over a hidden shape. Then from somewhere deeper in the hallway, something moved, a shuffle of footsteps, a breath that wasn't mine, the unmistakable sound of something dragging against the floor, slow and deliberate. I turned sharply, my pulse hammering, but the corridor ahead was empty, the only movement coming from the dim flicker of a single overhead light. I waited, listening, every inch of me on edge, but the sound didn't come again. I moved forward. The hallway stretched on longer than it should have, the kind of distance that made no sense given the size of the building. The doors along the walls were all closed, their frames swollen with age, their handles rusted. But one door, at the very end, stood slightly open, its darkness yawning wide like a mouth waiting to swallow me whole. The footprints led straight to it. I hesitated for only a second before pushing it open. Inside, the room was bathed in the dim, flickering glow of a single bulb, its light swaying as if something had disturbed it just moments before. A dressing room by the look of it, though most of the furniture was covered in white sheets, their surfaces draped like forgotten ghosts. A vanity stood against the far wall, its mirror lined with dusty bulbs, most of them broken, leaving only a few weakly flickering points of light. And in front of it, facing away from me, sat a chair, and someone was in it. The figure was still, perfectly motionless, their hands resting on their lap, their head tilted slightly as if watching something in the mirror. Their hair was dark, long enough to brush against the collar of the suit they wore, the fabric pristine despite the dust in the air. My breath slowed. I took a step forward. The figure didn't move. I could see their reflection now, just barely, their face obscured by the grime coating the mirror's surface. Something about the angle wasn't quite right. The way the reflection sat just a little off, like it was lagging behind, waiting for something. I swallowed. Charlie Graves. My voice was steady, but it felt too loud in the quiet, like I was breaking some kind of unspoken rule just by speaking his name. No response. I took another step. Still nothing. Then as I moved closer, I saw it. The dust on the chair. The untouched surface of the fabric. The realization hit me just as my eyes dropped to the floor. The footprints. They led to the chair, but they didn't lead away. A slow, crawling dread wrapped itself around my spine, cold and cloying. I took a careful step to the side, trying to see the figure's face more clearly in the reflection. The light flickered, the mirror's surface seeming to ripple like water, and for the briefest moment, I saw it. Not a man, not a person, something else, something smiling. Then the bulb above me burst. Darkness swallowed the room, and in that instant, I heard it, right behind me, close enough that I could feel the breath against my ear. A whisper, slow, software, and filled with something hungry. The show's not over. I spun, my hands reaching for my weapon, my body moving on instinct, but the room was empty. The chair sat in the same place, untouched, unoccupied. The mirror was just a mirror again, its surface smeared with age, reflecting only my own wild-eyed expression. But something was different. A single card sat on the vanity, placed carefully on the dust-covered surface. It hadn't been there before. I stepped forward, reaching for it with fingers that didn't quite feel like my own. The card was thick, smooth beneath my touch, its surface blank except for 4 simple words written in elegant, curling script. You're already in it. The air felt too thin. The walls seemed closer. I turned sharply, moving toward the door, needing to get out, needing to breathe. But as soon as I stepped into the hallway, I knew something had changed. The corridor wasn't the same. The posters were gone. The doors had disappeared. And from somewhere far ahead, deep in the darkness, the sound of applause began again. Soft at first, then louder and louder, until it was all I could hear. The sound of applause grew, rolling through the hallway in waves, filling the space with something that felt almost alive. Not just noise, but presence, thick and pressing, wrapping itself around me like unseen hands. I swallowed hard, my pulse hammering against my ribs as I stepped forward. Each footfall drowned beneath the rising tide of clapping. It wasn't just a recording. It wasn't mechanical. It felt real, felt like people, felt like a room full of them, unseen but there, just beyond the edges of the dim corridor, watching, waiting. I turned, scanning the darkness for something, anything, that would tell me I wasn't alone, that there was someone else here, breathing the same thick air, hearing the same impossible sounds. But the hallway stretched empty, the doors that had once lined the walls gone now, replaced by smooth, uninterrupted surface, as if the space itself had shifted the moment I looked away. I needed to move. I forced myself forward, pushing against the weight of the noise, my steps quick, controlled, measured. The applause didn't fade. If anything, it grew sharper, more distinct, as if the audience was getting closer, as if they were standing just out of reach, their hands moving in perfect rhythm, their bodies pressed against the darkness, unseen but impossibly near. Then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the applause stopped. The silence that followed was worse. It wasn't empty. It wasn't relief. It was something waiting. I exhaled slowly, my breath too loud in the hush. My own heartbeat the only thing breaking the stillness. Then from somewhere ahead, something shifted. A sound, so soft I almost missed it. Not clapping, not movement. Breathing, slow, measured, not my own. I tensed, every muscle in my body locked in place, my fingers instinctively twitching toward my weapon. The air in the corridor felt heavier now, pressing against my skin, thick like fog, like something unseen curling around my limbs, waiting to tighten. Then a voice, low, smooth, familiar. You found me. The words weren't loud, but they cut through the silence like a blade, threading through the darkness with an eerie sort of ease, like they had been waiting for me to arrive, like the speaker had known, always known, that I would end up here, standing in this impossible place, listening to a voice that shouldn't exist. I turned slowly, my fingers tightening around the grip of my gun, my body locked between instinct and hesitation. The corridor stretched ahead, dimly lit by flickering bulbs that hadn't been there a moment ago, their weak glow barely cutting through the heavy air. And at the very end, standing just beyond the reach of the light, was a figure, tall, still, watching. I couldn't see his face, but I didn't need to. I already knew who it was, Charlie Graves. His posture was relaxed, almost casual, one hand resting in his pocket, the other hanging loosely at his side, fingers just barely curled, as if he was holding something just out of sight. He didn't move, didn't step forward, didn't acknowledge the way my hand hovered near my weapon. He only smiled. It was the same smile from the footage, the same smooth expression from the posters, something meant to look inviting, effortless, charismatic. But up close in the dim and shifting light, it was wrong, too controlled, too perfect. a mask stretched just a little too tight. I exhaled slowly, steadying myself. Where are they? My voice was even, steady, but the question sat heavy between us, the weight of it pressing into the thick air like a second presence. Charlie tilted his head slightly, his smile never faltering. They're here. My fingers twitched. I forced them still. Where? His eyes flickered, something cold and knowing glinting behind them. You've already seen them. I clenched my jaw, my mind racing, the weight of his words sinking in too fast, too deep. I thought of the applause, the presence in the dark, the way the walls had shifted, the doors disappearing, the audience that had been there but hadn't been there. I thought of the bodies in the footage, the ones who had stood, the ones who had walked, the ones who had smiled just before. A slow, creeping horror unfurled in my chest, something cold and crawling and undeniable. I took a step back. Charlie took a step forward, not fast, not aggressive, just inevitable. His eyes locked on mine, something sharp gleaming behind the smooth exterior of his expression. Do you understand now? His voice was quiet, like a secret whispered just for me. Something meant to slip past the defenses, to settle. I swallowed against the dryness in my throat, forcing myself to stand my ground, forcing my voice to stay level. What did you do to them? Charlie's smile widened, but his eyes stayed cold. I didn't do anything. He spread his hands slightly, as if to show he was empty, as if to show he had nothing to hide. They did it to themselves. The words sent a slow, sick twist through my stomach. I wanted to deny it, wanted to fight it, but the images from the footage wouldn't leave my head. The way they had moved, the way they had obeyed, the way they had smiled as they took their own lives. And Vanessa, the only one who had fought, the only one who had tried to wake them up. My breath came slower now, each inhale feeling heavier, like the air itself was turning against me, seeping into my lungs in a way that felt unnatural. Charlie took another step forward, closing the distance between us with an ease that made my skin crawl. It's not about control, he murmured, almost thoughtful. It's about permission. I stiffened, my fingers curling into fists. Permission for what? He studied me for a long moment, his eyes flickering, with something unreadable, something amused. Then slowly he lifted one hand. Just slightly, just enough to let his fingers twitch in the air. A subtle, almost imperceptible movement, and the lights flickered. Not just the bulbs overhead, the entire space around us seemed to pulse, the walls shuddering, the air shifting, the floor beneath my feet vibrating with something I couldn't see. And behind me, all at once, came the sound of dozens of footsteps, moving in unison, approaching. I turned sharply, my pulse spiking, my body bracing for whatever was coming, whatever had been lurking just out of sight, whatever had been waiting. But there was nothing, only the empty hallway, only the silence. Then Charlie's voice, closer now, quiet and calm and certain. You've already joined the audience. And when I turned back to him, when I met his gaze, I finally understood. I wasn't the one watching the show. I was in it. The words sat heavy in the air, pressing down on me like an unseen weight, something thick and suffocating, something that curled around my thoughts and squeezed until doubt started to take shape. I wasn't the one watching the show. I was in it. The realization sat like ice in my veins, a slow spreading cold that made my limbs feel sluggish, made my breath come a little too shallow. Charlie Graves was still standing there, his expression unreadable, his head tilted slightly like he was watching something fascinating unfold. Something he had seen 100 times before, something he already knew the ending to. I forced my fingers to unclench, feeling the tension in my muscles coil tight, ready to react, ready to fight if I had to. I wasn't hypnotized, I wasn't under his spell. I knew that much. I could feel the weight of my own thoughts, the resistance inside me, the awareness of the moment that told me I was still me. But something was wrong. The air felt too thick, like breathing was taking more effort than it should, like the atmosphere itself was shifting in a way I couldn't quite understand. The walls around me still looked the same, but they felt closer, the space pressing in ever so slightly, like the club itself was exhaling slowly, like it had noticed me now. Charlie didn't move. He didn't speak. He only watched. I took a slow step back, testing the ground beneath my feet, waiting for something to change, waiting for some invisible force to snap tight around me. Nothing happened, but I could feel it. The waiting, the moment stretching too long, the silence that felt calculated, like it had been placed there deliberately, like it was meant to see what I would do next. I exhaled, steadying my voice. "Where's Vanessa?" Charlie's smile didn't falter, but something in his eyes flickered. Something small, something sharp. A recognition. He knew why I was really here. He knew the name, and he wasn't surprised. "She was different," he said finally, his tone smooth even, carrying none of the weight the words should have had. "She was strong." The way he said it sent something cold down my spine, the past tense curling around my nerves like a whisper of something I didn't want to understand. I took another step back, my mind running through possibilities, trying to place my next move, trying to map out what was real and what wasn't. The last person who had resisted him, the only one in the footage who had fought against whatever hold he had over them, and now she was gone. No body, no answers. Just a name on a missing persons report, a final frame in a tape that ended too soon. I needed to get out. I needed to find something real again, something solid, something that wasn't this place, this shifting, impossible space that seemed to breathe around me. Charlie must have seen the thought cross my mind because his smile widened. Just slightly, just enough to let me know he had seen it all before. "You can leave," he said simply, the words rolling off his tongue too easily, too smooth. "You can turn around, walk back through that door, step into the world you think you came from." Something about the way he said it made my stomach tighten. The world I think I came from. I didn't hesitate. I moved fast, my boots scuffing against the old floor as I turned sharply, heading for the direction I had come from, forcing my body to ignore the pressure in the air, the heaviness that tried to sink into my muscles, the feeling that told me turning my back on him was a mistake. The hallway stretched ahead. The lights flickered weakly. The shadows seemed to deepen in the corners, stretching along the floor in shapes that didn't quite match the objects that cast them. I pushed forward, my steps deliberate, my breath steady. The door just ahead, the one that would lead me back to the club, back to something real, something mine. I reached for the handle, and the moment my fingers brushed the cold metal, the applause started again. Louder this time, all around me, inside me, a deafening roar of hands slamming together, the sound swelling, vibrating through my bones, rushing into my skull like a tide of unseen bodies filling the space, moving closer, pressing against me in ways I couldn't see but could feel. I clenched my teeth, yanking the door open, stepping through before I could second guess, my body slamming into the other side, into what should have been the club, into what should have been the world I knew. But it wasn't. I stumbled, my footing thrown off, my balance wrong. The lighting was different, warmer, dimmer. The space wasn't the club's main floor anymore. Wasn't the stage, wasn't the world of empty chairs and long-forgotten performances. It was an auditorium, a full one, seats stretching out endlessly before me, faces staring back, blank and unmoving, eyes locked onto me with the stillness of a crowd waiting for something, waiting for the performance to begin. The stage lights flared. A spotlight cut through the dimness, pinning me in place, locking me in the center of the wooden floor. The heat of it searing against my skin, making the space outside of it vanish into pure darkness. I turned, breath sharp, heart slamming against my ribs, but there was no exit, no door, no hallway behind me, just the stage, just me. And then, from somewhere beyond the blinding lights, a voice, Charlie's, calm, smooth, welcoming. "Ladies and gentlemen." The audience didn't move, didn't blink. He continued, his tone warm, practiced, the cadence of a man who had said these words 1,000 times before. "Tonight, we have a very special guest." The applause started again, thunderous, wrong. The air pressed in tighter, the weight of the unseen crowd sinking into my chest, my pulse hammering in my ears. I turned in place, scanning the darkness, looking for him, looking for a way out, looking for anything. But then the screen behind me flickered. I froze. The grainy, distorted glow of an old projector filled the space, and on it, playing frame by frame, was me, standing on the stage, looking lost, looking exactly as I did now, a delay of only seconds. And then, the version of me on the screen moved, before I did, and smiled. The version of me on the screen smiled first, just a fraction of a second before I even thought about moving, just long enough for my brain to register that something was wrong, that what I was seeing wasn't just a recording, wasn't just a delay, but something else entirely. I froze, my breath tight in my chest, my body locked between instinct and disbelief. The screen flickered again, the grainy film quality making my own reflection stutter. The motion of my face caught somewhere between frames, my eyes just a little too dark, my expression just a little too knowing, and then it moved again. Not a reflection, not a recording. It stepped forward. Before I did, my stomach turned, a slow, sick realization sinking into my bones like something cold and heavy, like ice freezing over my insides inch by inch. I hadn't moved, but it had. The version of me on the screen tilted its head slightly, studying me with an expression I didn't recognize as my own. Something too calm, too deliberate, something that held a knowledge I didn't have. I took a step back. The version of me took a step forward. My pulse slammed against my ribs, my body going rigid, every nerve in me screaming that something was deeply, fundamentally wrong, that what I was seeing should not be possible, that I needed to move, to run, to get out before whatever this was unfolded into something worse. But I couldn't, because the audience was still watching. I could feel them, their presence pressing against my skin like heat from an unseen fire. Their collective focus locked onto me with a weight that made my limbs feel heavier, my breath feel thinner, my thoughts feel slower. The applause had stopped, but the expectation hadn't. They were waiting for the next move, waiting for the act to continue. The screen flickered again, and for the briefest moment, the version of me wasn't alone. A shape moved behind it, a figure, tall, dark, unclear. A presence standing just behind my duplicate, just in the edges of the frame, its form blurred, its face hidden. Something about it stretched, wrong, something not meant to be seen but seen anyway. My body tensed, a sharp inhale scraping against my throat, my mind trying to catch up, trying to process, trying to understand. And then the lights changed. A deep red glow washed over the stage, swallowing the wooden floor in color, casting shadows that bent in the wrong directions, stretching out toward me like fingers reaching across a distance too far to touch. My breath came shallow, my muscles locking in place even as my instincts screamed at me to move, to get off the stage, to break the illusion before it solidified into something I couldn't escape. Then Charlie's voice cut through the thick, stifling silence. Showtime! It wasn't a shout, it wasn't loud, but it filled the space, echoed inside my skull like a thought planted in my own head, like a whisper curling against my ear from just behind me, from somewhere I knew was empty, from somewhere I knew no one was standing. I turned anyway, nothing. Only the dark edges of the stage, only the endless rows of seats stretching out into the shadows, only the weight of unseen eyes watching, waiting, expectant. Then the laughter started, soft at first, just one voice, then two, then dozens. A low, rolling chuckle spreading through the space, seeping into the walls, curling under my skin. Laughter that didn't belong to a crowd, but to something else. Something that wasn't entertained but amused in a way that made my stomach twist. Laughter that knew something I didn't, that was in on the joke I wasn't a part of. I turned back to the screen. The version of me was closer now, much closer. Its smile had widened just slightly, just enough to reveal something wrong with its teeth. Something a little too sharp, a little too bright in the dim red light. It lifted a hand, slowly, deliberately, a single index finger raising to its lips. Shh. The laughter stopped. Silence. Heavy. Oppressive. Then, in that perfect, empty quiet, the version of me on the screen spoke. Not in my voice. Not in any voice I had ever heard. Something deeper. Something layered. Something other. You never left, I exhaled sharply, a spike of something cold shooting down my spine, my body reacting before my mind could fully process, my feet moving, turning, pushing forward off the stage, off the wrongness of the moment, off the weight of whatever this was before it could solidify around me. My steps felt too slow, the air around me too thick, like moving through water, like something unseen was pressing against my limbs, making each movement heavier, making each decision just a second too late. But I reached the edge of the stage. I stepped off, and the moment my feet hit the floor, the world shifted, like blinking and finding yourself somewhere else. The audience was gone. The stage was gone. The screen was gone. I was standing in the middle of the empty club, the dusty, abandoned chairs stretching out before me, the same dim flickering bulbs overhead, the same silence, the same dead air. The dressing room door was still open. The footprints in the dust still led to the chair. The card was still there, lying on the vanity, the 4 words in perfect, curling script. You're already in it. My pulse pounded in my ears, my breathing unsteady, my body still locked in the sensation of movement, as if I had just stepped out of something that hadn't finished letting go of me. Had any of it happened? Had I imagined it? I turned, my eyes scanning the space, my mind scrambling to anchor itself back in reality, to shake off the feeling of something unseen still watching me, still waiting, still pressing against the edges of my thoughts like a whisper I couldn't quite hear. And then, just as I reached for my radio, just as I tried to remind myself that I was real, that I was here, the speakers crackled, a voice, clear, software right next to my ear. You should have stayed for the encore. The voice coiled around my ear like breath against my skin, soft and close and undeniably real, threading through my thoughts before I even had time to react, before my body could catch up with my brain, before I could convince myself that it hadn't actually happened. Every inch of me went rigid, my fingers tightening instinctively, my pulse hammering too fast, too uneven, my breath caught somewhere between fight and flight. The words still hung in the air, weightless but suffocating, the last trace of a presence that I knew hadn't been there a second ago. I turned sharply, my hand already reaching for my weapon, my movements too fast, too desperate, but the space around me was empty. The club was still just a club, abandoned, hollow, filled with the same dead air, the same dust settling in undisturbed layers across the seats, the same peeling wallpaper curling in the corners like something trying to escape. The speakers were silent again, their old wires crackling faintly, but there was nothing. No one. I swallowed hard, forcing my breathing to steady, forcing my mind to latch onto the reality in front of me, to push away the lingering sensation of something else that still clung to my skin like static. I needed to move. I needed to get out of here. Whatever this was, whatever had happened, I couldn't stay. But as I turned toward the exit, my footsteps sent a whisper of dust curling up from the floor, breaking the stillness, sending a soft echo into the hollow space. And that's when I noticed it. The footprints. Not mine. I froze, my eyes tracking the faint indentations in the dust, following the uneven pattern of steps leading away from the chair in the dressing room, trailing back through the club, cutting across the empty dance floor. The same footprints I had followed before, the same ones I had assumed belonged to Charlie Graves, except now there was a second set, lighter, smaller, leading in the opposite direction. I exhaled slowly, my stomach twisting into something tight and uneasy. The first set of prints had led to the chair, but these led away. Vanessa. It had to be. I hesitated, my mind screaming for me to leave, to turn around, to push through the doors, and put as much distance between myself and this place as possible. But my body was already moving, my legs carrying me forward before I had time to think better of it. Before I had time to remind myself that nothing about this was normal, that nothing about this was safe. The prince led toward the back of the club, to a door I hadn't noticed before, half hidden in the shadows, the edges warped from heat damage, the surface scorched like someone had tried to burn it down long ago. The handle was cold beneath my fingers, the metal smooth despite the years of decay, and when I pushed, the door gave way with a sound like an exhale, like the building itself was releasing a breath it had been holding. The room beyond was small, barely more than a storage space, the walls lined with old equipment, broken chairs stacked in uneven piles, forgotten props scattered across the floor. But in the center of the room, lit only by the faint glow of the emergency exit sign buzzing weakly in the corner, was a figure, slumped, still, but breathing. Vanessa. My pulse kicked hard against my ribs, my breath catching as I moved toward her, my hands reaching out instinctively. She was sitting on the floor, her back pressed against the wall, her dark hair hanging loose over her face, strands sticking to her skin with sweat. Her clothes were wrinkled, her hands trembling where they rested against her lap, her fingers curling and uncurling, like she was trying to convince herself they were still hers. I dropped to a knee beside her, my voice low, steady, careful. Vanessa. Her head lifted slowly, her eyes unfocused, her pupils blown wide, her lips parted slightly like she was still caught in the middle of something, like she was listening to something I couldn't hear. For a moment she didn't respond, her gaze slipping past me, over my shoulder, into the space behind me, and then, barely above a whisper, "You're not supposed to be here." A sharp chill cut down my spine, my body tensing, my instincts flaring in warning. But I kept my voice calm, kept my hands where she could see them, kept my movements slow. "I'm here to get you out." She let out a breath that sounded almost like a laugh, but there was no humor in it, only something hollow, something exhausted. "You can't," she whispered, her fingers twitching against her knee. "It doesn't work like that." My jaw tightened. "Like what?" She blinked slowly, her gaze still not meeting mine, still fixed on something just past me. "It doesn't let you leave." I exhaled sharply, my grip tightening. "Vanessa, listen to me. Charlie Graves is dead. Whatever he did to you, whatever he made you think." She flinched at his name, her breath hitching, her fingers curling into fists against her lap. And then, finally, her eyes met mine. "He's not dead." The words sat heavy in the air between us, thick and unmoving. I stared at her, my brain working too fast, trying to make sense of what she was saying, trying to rationalize, trying to force logic into a situation that had already abandoned it long ago. I shook my head, firm. "I saw the reports. I saw the footage. He's not dead." Her voice was sharper now, more certain, something raw bleeding through the exhaustion. "That's not how this works. That's not how he works." I swallowed hard, forcing down the rising unease clawing at my chest. "Then tell me how it does work." She let out another breath, slower this time, steadier, her fingers relaxing just slightly. And then, she whispered, "You let him in." The emergency exit light flickered. The temperature in the room dropped, a cold, creeping presence curling along my skin, threading through my breath, tightening around my ribs. And behind me, the sound of footsteps, slow, deliberate, moving closer. I didn't turn. Vanessa didn't blink. She only stared, past me, through me, into something I refused to look at. And then from right behind me, Charlie Graves' voice, smooth, even, amused. "I told you." The room around me pulsed, the walls shuddering, the floor shifting beneath my knees. "You were always in the audience." Darkness swallowed the room. The applause began again, and the curtain fell.